get started. We are filling, at least spatially, this room right now. So welcome everybody. I'm imagining the snow is slowing things down a little bit. Before our first session, we wanted to have some comments from some of the co-hosts. So I am actually going to speak as short as possible. I will disappear in a moment. I'm going to turn it over in a second to the co-director and co-founder of BARI, Chris Winship, who is also a professor of sociology at Harvard University. And he is going to say a few remarks welcoming you all. And then following him, Nigel Jacob, the co-chair of the Mayor's Office of Newark Mechanics. I would call him an honorary co-founder of BARI in some sense. Been with us since the beginning. We'll also give some welcoming remarks.
So thank you, Dan, and thank you all for getting here early in the snow. This is always one of those real problems where you impose on the people who show up early and let them have to wait forever for the people who show up late. Where we get going, so we're getting going. And Dan's giving me two assignments. One is to tell you that we're on Twitter. That's important. Second is, at the end of the day, we're not going to have a poster session, we're going to have a screen session. So we're going to have people wandering around with tablets to show you some of the neat research they're doing. So as you're eating cheese and drinking wine, I hope that's on the menu. It is. Look for people, see what they're up to, because I think, they're an enormous number of interesting projects. So I thought I would do two things. I particularly want to talk about BARI from an academic perspective, and then presumably Nigel will talk about it from the government/city perspective. I should say this is an effort that's been very long in the making. It really kind of starts in the mid-2000s. David Luberoff, who was director of the Rappaport Institute at the time, I started talking about how we really ought to get something going with the city. There's this interesting set of people over at City Hall. Rob Sampson shows up at Harvard in 2003. By sort of 2006, he's actually ready to start talking about things. Rob is enormously important because neither David or I are urban sociologists. I'm basically known for high-tech statistical work on causality, books that provide very good bedtime reading because they're so impenetrable. And before we really can get going, we get smashed with the fiscal crisis. And trying to figure out where there's money is a problem. And then Rob becomes director, I don't know what the exact title is, social science research and graduate. And the dean there, Barbara Gross, is feeling itchy. You know Barbara, she's a very itchy person. And in particular what she's itchy about is that, for the most part, what Radcliffe is doing is just supporting people's sabbaticals. If you have a sabbatical coming up, I highly recommend you think of applying to Radcliffe to support part of your salary. And she says, we need to do more policy stuff. We need to help, change the world. And Rob is there right at the right time to say, let's start with Boston. And so we start with Boston. Radcliffe actually puts in about $750,000 over 4 or 5 years. And we have the first conference in 2011. We're all sitting around very nervous, wondering whether enough people will show up. We're hoping for 100, we get about 420. I'll come back to that. So here we are with our third conference. What has been, goals been in BARI, particularly from an academic perspective. So the model I've always thought about is astronomy. And astronomers are like really great getting government and others to give them tons and tons of money to build very expensive telescopes. Right? Some of them are in Ghana, some are out in space, so on and so forth. And these telescopes become really a shared academic resource. In social sciences, I think we've been behind. There are important national surveys, but certainly at the local level, we don't have the telescopes that could be of enormous benefit to all of us. Right? Too often, what we do is we get a hold of some data, we do what it needs to be done, cleaning it up, finding the variables we care about, writing our papers and sending them off, and then nobody sort of puts the extra 10-20% of work that's needed to make that data actually usable to anybody else. So one huge goal has been this idea of some kind of data warehouse, data system. When we first talked, there was a lot of discussion about sort of where was the data going to sit. I think we all know it's now going to sit someplace in the cloud. The notion that anybody actually has the data is kind of an idea from the past. Second, and what came particularly out of that first conference, was the recognition that there's so much potential intellectual synergy across universities in Boston. I mean, Boston is unique. Ben yesterday talked about it as unique within the country. No, it's unique within the world in terms of the number of universities. It has the number of researchers. And I think certainly in the social sciences, far too little talking with each other, far too little knowledge that there are people at some other institution who are doing research that, wow, is closely related to what I'm doing. And I should be talking with them, maybe even working with them. So another goal has been sort of trying to create synergistic partnerships across faculty. And then I put it as a third academic goal, trying to avoid reinventing the wheel. So I think a good example where we're still struggling is the number of institutions, both universities and others, who are trying to build GIS systems, continues to go on in parallel, some kinds of connections across, but we've yet to really figure out sort of how to make it all happen together as opposed to having a set of independent efforts. So what I wanted to say is thank you all for coming here, because in many ways your being here represents some of the success of BARI. At the first and second conference, basically all of the discussion was about potential, what we might do together, and wouldn't this be cool, and that kind of stuff. And what we really see today in all these sessions is, here's what we've done. Isn't it really cool? Wow, this model of both across universities and between universities and the city is working. So how about the city part from the academic perspective? Well, I think there are three things to be said. One is the recognition that, I think, generally seen across academia now, cities have a ton of data that's potentially useful. And isn't it neat that somebody they've already paid to have it collected? Unfortunately, they're not necessarily paid to have it cleaned up. And there's that interesting thing. So there's a whole lot of data out there that we can use. Second is maybe academics actually can be helpful to people who are policymakers by being partners in creating research that's policy relevant, helps make policy decisions. And then third, and I want to go back to that partner, and I think this is where Boston really has been a leader. I'm really interested to hear from Nigel. Often when we are in conferences that involve other players, they like to talk about the city government as a client, and usually one of us, several of us, stand up and say that's the wrong model, that really what we need is partnerships. And then really I think over the last 5 years is precisely because we've got academics working in partnership with people in government that BARI has had the successes as it has. So let me invite up Nigel to talk about it from the city perspective.
Thanks, Chris. That was great. Again, I also want to reiterate what Chris said in welcoming you all here. I want to say a couple of things about why it's important that you're here and why BARI exists and the importance of BARI. As was mentioned, I co-run an organization at Boston City Hall called the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics. And we have a very amorphous job. It is generally to invent the future. Take that however you want. It's been interesting. So I've been in government now for 10 years. Would never have imagined that kind of tenure, but here I am. And I think one of the things that's been interesting over those years has been the changing role of government. I would say when I started out, at least from my understanding, government was very much, it was often seen as the backstop to certain kinds of services, or as the data source of record, and was also often an impediment to doing interesting work and understanding how cities actually live and breathe. That's changed a lot over the years. I would say that we've gone from being a client, as Chris was saying, to more of a collaborator. And so increasingly, that has happened in the context, I think, of a changing kind of global realization of the importance of cities. And so now, this organization that just a few years ago was really seen as the impediment for good things to happen is now often seen as being on the front lines of taking on some of the big global challenges, urban challenges, which are now global, of our species, global poverty and conflict, climate change and so on. These are all big issues, obviously. And government, local government, is increasingly seen as a group that needs to be at the table. And the challenge has been, are we up to the task? And what we've discovered is we can get there, but it requires partnerships and collaborations. And this is definitely something that I've learned over my time at City Hall. My group, in our efforts to try to invent the future, it all happens collaboratively, right? So we no longer, I don't know if we ever did, but we don't see ourselves as the gatekeeper of data or of insight even. We increasingly see ourselves as a platform for partnerships, between the private sector and higher ed and community groups and social entrepreneurs and so on. And so increasingly, that has become our job. How do we connect the dots, especially in a city like Boston that has this sort of incredibly diverse and rich set of resources that we need to figure out how to connect. One of the things, another important thing that we've learned over the years is the importance of culture, especially in developing a culture of collaboration. And that's been, as I was saying, sort of central to our work in City Hall, in Mayor's Office of Urban Mechanics. And I would say that we need the same kind of culture if we're going to work with academics, with researchers on these big urban challenges. It's the same challenge frequently. How do we create a culture of sharing and shared vision for the kind of impact we're trying to have in this particular city, which we all live and increasingly do research. And so I think that's really the secret sauce. That's the critical part that BARI plays. It is a third-party organization whose job it is, their self-appointed job, is to bring people together and find those connections and create opportunities for building things, certainly across higher ed institutions, but with government, with for-profit companies, and so on. So I think it's really a critical function in this ecosystem this ecosystem of resources and challenges and opportunities that we're trying to stitch together. Boston is at a unique point in its history, I would say. If you look out the window, any window these days, increasingly downtown windows, but windows pretty much everywhere, you'll see the economic growth that's happening in the city. It's the second, depending on how you count things, the second biggest economic boom in Boston. And we're fortunate to have a mayor that realizes that that boom, that development kind of spike needs to be, it needs to support everyone. It can't only be for developers. It has to be shared equally. It needs to be able to float all boats. And so, with that as the backdrop, we went into a historic, for Boston, planning exercise called Imagine Boston, where the idea is to come up with a multi-dimensional vision for the future, sourced from the public, but articulated in such a way that it'll kind of chart the future. 2030 was sort of the frame that we used. And as part of that work, there were a lot of ideas about how to make Boston better. How do we improve community resilience? How do we improve infrastructure? All these different things, and transportation, mobility across the city, all these things. Boston's had a lot to say about that. And one thing that became clear to us, certainly to in the mayor's office, is that we, in order to deliver against this plan, we're going to need the support of people asking critical research questions. Was a particular investment in a community the right thing to do, or is there a more effective way of leveraging local resources and taking on different various local issues across the city? And so that's yet another role, I think, that BARI and the research community writ large, but certainly an organization like BARI can play, is to sort of take these sort of big ideas and shine the light of sort of scientifically driven research on these big plans. The last thing I'll say is, something, again, sort of a comment on the culture of government, or the way government thinks and works. For those of you that have paid attention or that are interested at all in sort of government innovation, public sector innovation, for many years now we've been talking about the need to become data-driven. And I think we've made kind of fits and starts there. And that is clearly one important direction that we need to kind of continue to go further into, explore further. But I think there's a step beyond that. I think we need to make the transition to being science-driven and how we think about the policies that we're deploying and the way that we're developing the strategic visions. It's not enough to be sort of taking a data mining approach to sort of looking for patterns. I think we need to really understand causality and root causes of different issues as they affect their community, and then also looking, sort of a clear-eyed view of how we are developing policy to address all these issues. And so, again, we will need, the research community to help us do that, indeed to help us kind of frame that whole notion. And again, the more that we can be collaborating, whether it's through organizations like BARI or otherwise, we need to be doing that as well. So I think we have a pretty cool day set up for you. Lots of interesting opportunities to sort of get involved. The one thing I'll leave with you is, again, sort of saying it in a different way, but something that Chris ended with. This work, this city will not get better unless we are collaborating, unless we're working together. And so I encourage you to just find people, find each other, find me, or any of my colleagues, and try to develop these relationships where we can try to figure out issues that we can take on together. I will say that what works better than just sort of asking for data, we'll certainly give you data if you ask for data, but what works better than that, I think, is to develop a relationship with us over time so that we can develop a shared sense as to what a community-oriented research agenda could look like, or thinking about the kinds of really big challenges that we want to work on. And that only happens when you ask bigger questions than simply may I have the data, please. So I encourage you to ask big questions and think big thoughts, and to come and pester those of us that are also interested in these kinds of things. Thanks very much.
Thank you to you both. I think it was a great way to kick off the day. So we're going to start sessions now. We're running a few minutes behind, so I imagine I'll just take out the beginning of lunch. But so those who want to go to sessions in other rooms, go to it, and we'll get the ballroom set up right now. Arvin, did Sam tell you? Did Sam tell you that Talia is no longer here?
She didn't, but